Welcome back to Mindful Notions, Accessible Intelligence launch. We have many names at this point, and this is our latest episode of what we are building. I can't believe we're halfway through March already. Me and Megan's birthdays are in March, so I do think we think it's the best month. I can't speak for both of us, but I hope you agree with that. And as always, a lot has happened. Megan, let's start with you. You are back in New York full time. You were in London previously, but you had spent a good amount of time in New York and SF before finally coming back to New York. So, what is this full break looking like? How did it all happen?
Okay, yes. So I got back to New York on Saturday. I just kind of felt like it was time. I think I had done 6 months in London, and it was great, and I really liked it. But I think that whole time I was trying to find a co-founder, and I was finding that really challenging. And I was coming back to New York anyway for the holidays, and I was like, when I come back, I'm just gonna see what happens. And I planned to go to SF and just check it out, see if I could find a co-founder. When I got back to New York, I did, and so
In New York, you
in
found her
New
in New York.
York,
Yeah.
yeah. And so I just kind of decided, like, I had been spending 6 months trying to find a co-founder. Maybe this is the time to just move back and try building here. So that was the main motivation for this move.
That makes sense. Talk a bit about how you find that founder. Last time we had talked about the synergies that you have with your founder, Hillary, with you and your co-founder. But what does that process look like? Because I think people's best reference points are just probably like the dating apps and also friendship
Yeah.
apps or finding friends. So what goes into finding a
Oh my god.
co-founder?
Yeah, it is exactly like dating. So I was on YC co-founder match, which is exactly like Tinder but for founders. It's like swipe left, swipe right.
It's its own app.
Its
YC
own app.
co-founder match. Okay.
Yeah. And it's actually made really well. Like if you don't go on it after 7 days, your account gets paused and they send you an email to like guilt you for not going on it. And
Wow.
they're like, you are like, by being inactive, you're causing the ecosystem to like not work the way it should be. And so we're putting your account on pause. Basically, I was on that for like 6 months. Was meeting up with people in London, calling them, meeting them in person, working with them, and yeah, got it. Yeah, it was truly like you're seeing multiple people at the same time. You're like, seeing if you work,
Seeing if it's a good fit, seeing if the
if it's
chemistry's
good,
there, if you want to go on a second date.
Yeah, total
Yes.
PTSD from dating on the dating apps.
Yes.
What would lead you to say no to someone?
Ooh, I think it's just like that. When you meet in person, you're working together, and if something just feels off, and
Hillary, you've never been a big fan of the dating apps. You've said it in better ways than that. But Hillary, why don't you? What are your thoughts here on the co-founder process and what Megan went through in London unsuccessfully and then in New York successfully?
Well, you see, like my relationship with the dating apps and dating in general, I did find my co-founder somewhat organically. And that's not to say like one is better than the other. Similar with the dating apps, one is not better than the other. It's just a personal preference. It is what was aligned with my. Okay, Austin. Okay, there. But it was what was aligned at the time. So, can you repeat your question?
Like, what are your thoughts on what you've seen from Megan's experience? Because you guys obviously have seen each other through a lot of stages. So, how are you viewing her London process, New York process, and all of that?
Oh, those are big questions. I feel like for Megan, like kind of sort of the premise of that question too. I feel like you really have adapted a lot to your surroundings. Where I feel like in London, you were very, a lot of your building was very much through like your founder community. And like that was sort of the center of a lot of things. And even thinking about like some of the content that you were creating on the side with like your handle, Gen Z Bestie, it was very much about like building things kind of from the ground up in that process. Whereas in New York, I feel like, well, obviously it's different because you have a co-founder here too, right? But I think you've also been exploring the different ways that the New York startup community exists. Like we've been talking about you going to events, and you've talked about like how people here are very motivated, but there's also like a significant community here. And it's interesting because I do feel like just even from hearing about it, it seems like you've had very distinctive experiences in London versus New York. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, that's valid.
Can you talk a bit more about the New York startup community and what you have seen in terms of the events you've gone to? What are they like? What are people usually talking about? And how
Yeah.
that stands out to your recent trip to SF?
Ooh, yeah. I will say I think finding New York a bit challenging.
Okay.
Yeah. I think yeah, much less open. Everything goes through an application. Everything is payroll gated.
What do you mean
And
by everything?
just like for a lot of the community events, you have to pay to go. You have to pay to be a part of the workspaces. You have to pay to go, like you have to apply, go through interviews. And when I was in London, I think because the founder community is much smaller, the fact that there even is a community means that it's very welcoming and open. And I think in SF, everyone's a founder. And
Yeah.
so everyone is very open in that way as well. I think in New York, the concentration of people is just much higher. And so naturally, they have to be more selective, I think. But it also means you kind of have to prove yourself first before you can be welcomed into these spaces. And I've been finding that challenging as someone who's just gotten here. Because when I was in London, I think it took me like 2 weeks to figure out where all the communities are. And here it's been a week and I've gone to like one event and gotten rejected from like dozens.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, New York tends to be that way just in general with events. I will say that the AI Collective generally keeps it as open as possible, and then it's more of a capacity thing, but definitely there's room for more free events that are also still high quality. So that's something I've been thinking about as well. Um, so you're just here for the foreseeable future? Or do you think you'll be bouncing around more? Or is it based on how Fig is doing? Which maybe explain, as with every episode, a bit of what Fig is, in case people don't
Yes.
know.
Okay, so Fig is a career exploration platform. And yeah, New York for the foreseeable future. My co-founder is based here, though her housing ends in like the end of March. So she was like,
So she's moving in with you, yeah.
Oh,
Just like the dating apps, like you get closer, you move in with your co-founder, talk about marriage. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but the marriage is the IPO. Like it's not actual marriage, it's you guys IPOing.
No,
Yeah,
yes.
or getting acquired. Yeah.
Don't they say that you're supposed
Austin,
to
take the
have-
mic in case people can't hear you. Take the mic.
I mean, you were talking about earlier that, like, I think it was Mark and Drace, and someone said that for a good co-founder relationship, it's basically like a marriage relationship where you go to counseling, you do all these things as if it's,
And have you been to counseling yet with your co-founder?
No, we haven't. Yeah, not yet. But I think, yeah, there are probably like conversations we haven't had yet. And I think it's just because we've just been trying to build and like release things. But I think an aspect of the co-founder relationship that I haven't really put enough thought into is like, yeah, like how do you foster that sustainably long term? And so I haven't done all the marriage counseling stuff yet, but maybe one day we should do that.
Yeah, and we'll be talking about it on this episode. So that's a reason to stay tuned. I was gonna switch to Austin, but actually I think Hillary it makes more sense. So not to pass Austin up in that vein, but Hillary, since you also have a co-founder, how's it going with Brendan, who maybe we'll have here one day? But how are things going? You put out a piece last week about it was your first write-up on testing, so you can start there or start wherever. But yeah, how are things going?
Yeah, broadly speaking, it's going great. So like just to quickly go off what Megan was saying, actually she and I were talking recently specifically about like our dynamics with the respective co-founders, with the difference being like I've known Brendan for literally like like 11, 12 years, like literally since like we were like 11 years old or something like that. And there's something to be said about like having that like understanding of a person beyond just kind of like who they are as a worker and what their like aspirations are, which isn't like, no like value judgment onto it, but it is different. It's similar, I would say, in some ways. Like you really think of it in terms of dating to when you know someone like more deeply because of their history, right? Your history with that person versus someone who you meet a little later in life, but maybe like you're able to more wholly like share like that newer part of yourself. So really do want to extend the dating parallels there because I really do think it's like very apt. It's a very intimate relationship. It's going great. I think when I think about like the two of us working together, I really just think about our meetings a lot. because like that's truly just like where the magic happens. Like we both obviously put in a lot of work, right? Like for example, the report. I'm just speaking from my perspective, but like that was the product of like a lot of time spent like doing the testing and then analyzing the testing and then writing it up. Like it's like I don't know, like 16 pages or something like that. And that's not to just be like, oh, whatever, but like it takes a lot of time. And I understand that Brendan also spends a lot of time like working on the code, like making sure things work. But again, like that's our independent work. What I really think is the beauty of our collaboration is truly just the conversations that we're having because it's just that push and pull. It's really that dialogue that sort of comes through where like I'll have an idea and then like he'll respond to it. You know what I mean? Or he'll have an idea and I'll respond to it. And that just makes it feel so I don't know, creative. Like I've always I've always been this big fan of this concept of, like co-creation, which is like with other people, like you're creating something that's greater than some of your parts, right? And I very much feel that way with Brendan, where it's like we are, we come from like a similar perspective. We want to do the same thing, right? But each time we talk about it, and we especially when we go into like the most nitty gritty details, it's like that's how we start like building out the nuances of the product, right? Like we start talking about like little things, like for example, like do we want it to use I? Like do we want to like add a notepad or like a bullet point like icon to indicate the summary section, like little things like what does that mean, and then even just like expressing that and having that dialogue I just find like inherently productive. So it's been great. It's like a group project.
Yeah, I find it super interesting that for both of you, it almost seems like a given that you'd have a co-founder working on this thing. And I know initially when you were talking about why you wanted a co-founder, one of the big reasons was the push to get you to work on it. When you have someone else who's spending time on it, someone else who's putting their effort in, it pushes you to also put your effort in, gives you more responsibility. But when you think about all these others, the big startups, Facebook, whatever, you really think of founder, period. So why do you think, or how do you think would have been different other than maybe the pull of like getting you to do work if both of you were doing it yourself? I mean, you talked about creative process feels more accentuated than the person, but do you think you could have done it by yourself or like, but also just to say Facebook had co-founders for some reason,
Yeah.
like he's now.
I mean, there is like I don't really know the answer to that question, right? I think I maybe could have done it, but I can definitively say that it feels like it's a better product, like with his input. And the idea is to get other people's input too. So stay tuned. But yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, I tried it for 6 months and I didn't like it. And I think I very much romanticized the idea of like doing the startup, being an entrepreneur. And when I did, it was always with other people. And then trying to build by myself very much affirmed the fact that like sitting with my own thoughts is just a bad thing. Like I'm very good at like tearing down my own thoughts and convincing myself that my ideas are not right. And sometimes all you need is someone to be like, hey, like that's a cool idea. Like that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's hard. It's easy to forget that when you're just like sitting all day with just you and yourself. So yeah, I think having a co-founder is just great because it takes you out of that mindset, brings you outside of your own head.
Hillary, I feel like you're in this funny period where you're kind of in between your current job and starting law school somewhere in August. You have written about that in Substack, and I'm sure it's on your mind. So I think I'm curious to know more about how you are viewing April to August in terms of this, once again, untitled startup project, because it adds a different angle to the timeline. Like for Magan, I'm sure the goal is just to be a quieter. I mean, eventually if it goes big, whatever, like how it goes that way. But Hillary, I think your timeline's a little different. So how does that factor into the decisions you're making with Brendan now and then for the next few months?
Um the timeline is very different. It's it's shorter than I kind of thought it would be when I first like decided that I would really dedicate myself in this time, like to just work on my startup and my writing basically like close like full time. But I thought about it and I was like, I'm basically on summer break. I'm on like summer break plus like a little less than 2 months. So it definitely brings, I don't know. On the one hand, like it feels like a very long time. I'm like, wow, I have like before I used to work 8 hours a day. Like if I was going to the office, that's longer, right? What am I gonna do with like 8 hours of my own time? Like, even when I was a student, I was grinding. I was not sitting down somewhere and working for 8 hours, and then doing that over like months. So on the one hand, it feels like a very long period of time. But on the other, it's like, okay, like what does it actually take? So I think when I really so I've actually thought through this with my untitled startup, and I was like, I just want to think through like how to spend these months sort of responsibly, and it walked me through like what does responsible mean. I was like, oh, there's a difference between like personal and professional and financial responsibility. But I think that's a digression. But like what I would really appreciate coming out of this is just having a portfolio. I think that's probably the most accurate way to describe like what I want. I just want something to show for the period. Like I want to produce, whether it be like my writing, having a concrete app, having concrete user feedback, having this process that's just very documented throughout these months. And I think that's all I want. And in some ways, there's no sort of like end to that either, right? It's just like as much as I can accumulate, and as long as it makes sense to keep going, I will keep going.
That makes sense. And I don't think there's a perfect way to go about it. You have this limited time that you can really just spend however you want. And on one hand, as you mentioned, that's freedom. But on the other hand, that's probably a lot of hand wringing as well, and just trying to make the best decisions you can. So, kind of with the marriage counseling for co founders, we will put a pin in that and see how you're feeling in a few weeks. I think it's funny that we've talked now about co founders being like romantic relationships, but we have a romantic relationship right here. So, I also think it'd be good to know, how does that actually work when the two of you obviously are doing very different things, also with your Substack Compete, Hillary with your Untitled Startup, and also various things. Those are just the ones I want to focus on. But how much of your talk and hangouts are about what you're creating versus other things that people who aren't doing these things would be doing? Like how much does that actually bleed into the conversation? Do we need to put guardrails on it, boundaries? I think a lot of people would like to know. I would like to know. I don't know if Megan would, but yeah, like what is the dynamic?
Honestly, we don't really talk about it. I feel like
Do you agree with that?
maybe
No? What?
Uh-oh.
Like,
Tension.
I feel like mostly how it happens is one of us will like put out a piece, or like you have just have met with Brendan, and then for like maybe 5 to 20 minutes we'll talk about it. Say, oh, I really liked this. That was great. These are the reasons why I liked it. But I don't know if it really comes up that frequently.
You know, okay,
I think our conversations maybe are often tangential to it. Like,
yeah, our conversations are very, in terms of content, very tangential. I think the reason why I initially reacted the opposite was, okay, I think I agree with you in terms of the content of our conversation is not directly about what we're building, but I think because we're in pretty constant communication throughout the day, and we spend a lot of our days like working and thinking about this, it's like on my mind when I think of you, for example. I'm like, even today, I was like, oh, like, what are you gonna be doing after work today? Right? We were just like texting casually, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna be writing. So I was like, okay, he's like writing. So I have that like in my mind, which you did not do, unfortunately. But like, it like comes up in that sense. And then also like when we hang out, like a lot of the time it is like us working together, or we're like, oh, like I would like to get this done today. So it comes up in that context, but I think that when we are together and like trying to spend quality time together, I think it's easy for us to both get engrossed in our work as well. It is like all encompassing in some way. And we definitely spend a lot of our time together just like working, which is maybe a little bit different from some other couples, but that makes it all the more important. And we've like actually actively like, talked about this before, like actively setting those boundaries and being like, okay, when we're together, we need to be like, there are other things to talk about and to like be fully present. But also I want to direct it to Megan. Actually, you can dismiss it if you don't want to talk about it. But I know that you've also previously worked. You've also like previously worked with your boyfriend on a startup, and curious like what you think about what we kind of just said and like your own sense of like boundaries when it comes like sort of blurring the lines between sort of like personal relationships and more like professional relationships.
Yeah. I think what we found is that we had no boundaries. And it did at some point, I think, come up as like more of a problem. And we were like, okay, what if we had like date nights where we just did not discuss this at all because it was like day in, day out.
Right.
That's the only thing we talked about. Just yeah. So yeah, I like this situation that you guys have going. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like a new normal. I think something me and Hillary often talk about is these mid 20 somethings like us. We are navigating this reality that no current older generation really can relate to. It used to be that when you were finishing up college or you're in your early 20s, talk to the person 2 years older than you to get a little bit of the future. And now they say things that sound alien to us. They tell us things that generally don't really work. Like just get a referral and you're good. That's usually not the case. Or even with the notion of having, I really try not to say notion outside of the context of the company because I say it too many times, but the concept of having a main job and then a side hustle is so foreign to people like my sister, who's a millennial. She's like, you have a job. Like that's the main thing. She, not explicitly her, but that is her thinking for how her career has progressed, how some of our older siblings as well. Does anyone? Yeah. Austin, you have older siblings? Yeah. So I think it also, this is an offshoot of that. Not only are you changing how you're thinking, but how are you dating now? And is your partner also creating something? That's something that, as somebody who is single and dating, I do think about. Like, is it important for me to have a partner who also gets that and is doing it, or is it just important that that person understands why I feel like not only I should live this way, but like I need to live this way to figure it out.
Agreed with you, but also like friendships, right? Like I think we like as a group, that's also partly why we come together too, right? Like friendships that are also built on that. I don't know. Just want to add that as well.
How do you
Can't
think?
forget friendship.
No, that's true. Why do you think we've like how have we developed this? I don't know.
I think I can only speak for myself, but it's going through like a really shitty job search process. And I think for me, everybody has their own, let's say, breaking point with it. But I think when you see, I think it starts with COVID and seeing like just at the biggest scale outside of space, like the biggest scale of things going to shit and like things being fragile and actually nobody knows what's happening. And then never really getting back to like normalcy. You can argue that crises have of course happened, like the financial crisis of 2008, but then things kind of went back to normal in terms of like our childhoods weren't really impacted by like what that happened, or like SARS was obviously a really bad outbreak, but largely in Asia in the early 2000s, so that wouldn't affect us right up here. So I think it felt like since the pandemic and then the job search being just so, again, just for me, it's like so awful mentally, where there's this like no way I can go back to that mentality of just trusting a process just because it's been walked through, and instead not only trusting my own opinions but knowing that whatever creativity I have, even though it's definitely not like more conventional ones you grow up with like drawing or painting or all of that, knowing that I can make Notion templates and Notion agents a bit better than the people around me, which is why I work there now, and knowing that I'm probably learning Substack a bit better than people around me, and knowing that has ways to sustain me both creatively and professionally. It's kind of like both driven by fear, but also now by like passion, because I feel like I can do something again just a bit better than other people. Yeah.
I totally agree with that. Both driven away from something and also pulled towards something.
Yeah.
And I think a third factor is also just social media. And we've talked about it before, but the potential of entrepreneurship or doing something yourself, or having your self-starting job is almost like shoved down your throat
For sure.
repeatedly,
For sure.
for good and bad. It's done on social media because the more you do it, the more like it attracts attention, it draws that whole attention economy. But it, for good and bad, it makes, I think, our generation uniquely feel like you can make that break without necessarily the similar awareness of like the odds that those are. Because I guess it's the success bias, whatever it's called, people who make it out,
Yeah.
people who survive, etc.
Yeah, for sure. I think that social media is definitely a big part of it. And I'm also curious to see how many people really buy into it still. I feel like a few years ago, again, around COVID times, it felt like anybody could do a hype house situation where you just like get people together and make dancing videos for the most part. And then a lot of those people have grown up like very successful careers. But I feel like for me, starting to make content in 2020, I kind of saw more of the ups and downs of it where I could see like just like with any economic engine, there's going to be obviously like, the top earners, and Megan is fast on her way to that. But for the large part, it'll just be this like micro side hustlers who are just making a good amount of money for them to put towards whatever they want that isn't essential. And that is definitely something I was able to create in DC. So I was able to experience that. And that shows that it is more of an economy thing versus this viral idea. But I don't know. I think a lot of people probably still, especially Gen Alpha, probably still believe that you just need to make a few videos. I don't know. I mean, Hillary, you coach quite young girls. Are they making TikToks and asking to be in TikToks? And are they making money?
Yes, they are asking. Not actually, less me.
man.
More my head coach to be in TikTok. Some of them have become viral. Yeah.
As well.
No, not monetized. I have no idea how that would work. But something I did want to just mention though, and maybe this is like a little bit outside of the scope, but like just on the topic of social media, like we're talking about it kind of now as a way to earn money, right? Like as a way to sort of, capitalize on it. But recently, Megan and I were also talking about using social media as like a form of documentary, because that is also one of the things I'm thinking about doing in my time in between sort of quitting my job and then starting law school. So yeah, thinking about like, can social media as a space that is very commercialized also authentically be a place for documentation? And like, I don't know, like what does that mean? Like, can you authentically pursue both simultaneously? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just such a interesting note, because I feel like it's almost too easy to, when you talk about big social media, big tech, all these things, to talk about the downsides, to talk about how it is either, getting kids online and permanently, cripplingly online way too early, or if it's, they're profiting off of your attention and drawing your attention. But you're so right. A lot of it is based off of ideas that are positive, whether that be like connection or, documenting. And I think you're exactly right that they could be exactly at the same time. No one's meaning necessarily one or the other. They just both happen.
Austin, let's stay on you for a second. Let's talk about the latest article that you have had published in European Guanxi, which is Europe's AI moonshot chance. First of all, great. Always great to see another publication of Austin's. We probably will be talking about many more. So talk us through a bit about what this AI moonshot chance is, but then also the publishing process, because again, this is a pretty just novel thing for any 24, 25-year-old to be thinking about, at least the majority of us. So again, I think it would just be good for us and then anyone listening to hear as well what the process actually looks like to get it from ideation to out there.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thank you. Second of all, so the concept, I believe, now that you mentioned that, I don't know what happened, because I think the title was supposed to be World Models.
Well, it's
but
different
now that you mention it, the title is definitely not World Models. It's Europe's AI moonshot chance. I think that's supposed to be the subtitle. Who knows? Anyways, it was called World Models initially because it's a double entendre about first half looking at what's the state of AI globally. So looking at models in the world models. Then the second half was kind of what the inspiration of the article was this story about Yan LeCun. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I used to say Yan LeTuan, which
maybe it's Yan. Or wait, it's
Yan?
Yann. Okay,
Yeah.
maybe it's Yan. Okay.
I used to say Yan LeTuan, but he's French, not Chinese. And essentially, he's called the godfather of AI. One of these people who came up with, I forget what it's called, but one of the frameworks for large language models, which is how the current AI chatbots, all of them work right now. he was at Meta, left Meta, moved to France, Paris, and is starting his own AI company based off of these things called world models. Now, what are world models? They're essentially, whereas large language models see the world through tokens, which are, unbelievable is un plus believable, or even believe able. And it's the way to break up words into ways that are easier for these machines to easily parse and easily understand. And it creates a bunch of connections between these tokens. And then that's how it sees the world. It's through relations of tokens. So the way I described it in the piece is it's like if someone was in a library, right, and have only ever been in a library their entire life, they'll be able to understand in a way connections very well between every single word. They'll be able to know apple. They'll be able to know apple is usually put with red, sweet, crispy, crisp. Um, but specifically him and a lot of other people think that this won't lead to super intelligence or all that. So essentially I was talking about this new model that he's trying to pursue, which is world models, which is more physical, so more for like robots, etc. That was the story. How it came and the editing process is, I think it's actually very easy to get published in when you're not in one of these hallmark big name journals. Like I tried before to publish in foreign affairs, foreign policy, these other ones. Those are really hard. And I think actually, in a way, you need recognition or institutional backing to get those. Perhaps not. Maybe I'm just bad, but I'll go with that. But with these smaller, and especially European Guanxi is a youth-led organization, so I think it's much more open. Like you're saying about London, it's Europeans, maybe that's why. But the process is essentially you pitch it to the organization. You depends how it goes. Whether you pitch like a 500 word like synopsis or the whole piece, they'll accept it. You either write it or it's already written. They'll edit it. You go through, respond to all the comments. It gets another version of edits. And you respond to that. Very simple, I guess. Yeah.
I guess a question. So you initially, before you found European Guanxi, as you mentioned, you were submitting to like these big name
Mhm.
places, and you were struggling to get traction for your work,
Mhm.
right? On the other hand, as you've mentioned, there are these platforms that are looking for work, right?
Mhm.
Something I would flag here that Austin also has his own platform, like Atlas,
Mhm.
where you sort of put a pause on it, but for a while you were really looking for people to write for you
Mhm.
and platform the work, right? That was the vision. Now, as Sam mentioned, like you publishing on European Guanxi, like that's a clear match of supply and demand, right? Like you were looking for a place to publish.
Right.
Great. There was this place accessible to you, right? But then I also know that you have that perspective of like a writer as in like the challenges of finding a place to publish.
Mhm.
But you also have the perspective of like someone who wants to publish other pieces, right? And the
Mhm.
challenges of finding writers who want to write for you,
Mhm.
right? What are your thoughts on like, this mismatch? Like I'm surely there are other people also who like have these publications who are soliciting people, right? But then
Right.
like I'm also sure there are a lot of people who are like, I have thoughts, but I just have nowhere to put it.
That's a really good point. I think a lot of it goes down to what both sides want, and specifically what someone who's writing wants from publishing their piece. What I was initially going into it with was wanting the recognition, wanting like immediate impact from this piece. So then I think your first thoughts go to these big publications because, at least for me, that's what I was reading every day. So it's like if I get published here, that's it. Your name's out there, huge thing. But in a way, I guess they have the same thought where they want immediate impact. They want the biggest institutions. So they're accepting people who are professors at universities. They're accepting people who are CEOs. I think Eric Schmidt writes a lot. He was the ex CEO of Google. I'm pretty sure if he pitches anything to foreign affairs, they accept it right away. Maybe not. Um, and then I think the alternative is kind of true. The smaller the publication, it becomes more of the writers. You do want to just get something published. It's more about quantity at that point, than necessarily like breakouts. Um, and the publishers are the same way. They're at that point wanting to get that consistency that leads to them having more prestige with that.
It's also just a sustainability issue. I mean, I think that if you get one good piece, whether you are the writer or you are the publisher, it's always like, what's next? What's next? Because especially at least in AI world, when the news cycle is so supercharged, I think the reason why Twitter articles have kind of taken off directly from the software engineers or the design leaders is because there isn't enough time to try to go to like in tech
Yeah.
world to the information or TechCrunch. Like just write it yourself. And I think that's the beauty of platforms share like Twitter, but also with Substack, of course, and why Austin can have a Substack and I can have a Substack and you can have a Substack. Megan's technically on Substack, so we got her on there, and we're gonna keep integrating her into the ecosystem, just like with Notion. And I think it's also just a really fast changing landscape where those types of processes just aren't cutting it, at least for tech, but it's going to spill over. It probably already has started to spill over into politics, for example. I mean, huge followings on X and Substack as well. Not so much people trying to get into like the Washington Post, which has had layoffs because it's been a bad business model for years. And people are shocked when a bad business model doesn't like encourage people to stay on. Like, I just think the business models of news has just changed so much, and I think it's really exciting. It's also deeply uncertain, but that I think also contributes to the mismatch because I mean the mismatch is already changing in and of itself as well. Yeah.
Yeah, you're so right with that. And I've never actually thought about that with journals and such. Because the example that always comes to mind is just mainstream media.
Yeah.
All these TV stations that people watch. That's not keeping up with the times. But you're exactly right, especially with tech, but I would say with a lot of other stuff too.
Of course.
Even at European Guanxi, which is very, I would say, casual-ish, very smaller side, it is just such a extended period. Even if you're like immediately put as soon as the piece is done, you get published. That still is quite a while because you have to write it. Then there's a little bit of time. Someone edits it. A little bit of time. Then you edit. All of that. And that's not usually the case though if you get it published right away, because then you get put into this process of other people who are ready. And it just feels completely different when you write on Substack and you can put it out right away. And there is this, I wonder the implications of that when it is like, maybe there is a little bit more forethought that goes into it when it does go through editing cycles, and maybe it really is protective of like an institution if you're coming from like an institutional angle, but it does just feel better, and maybe that's why it feels also more personal when people write on Substack.
Yeah, that was, you pretty much hit it on the head, where I was gonna say like, well, for your own like publication for Atlas, you have like a review process, right? You get to it pretty quickly, but like you're still, you want to add in the edits, you want to make sure it goes through a certain like quality control process, right? And I think this gets into this bigger conversation that we've had here before, which is like you get things out quickly and there's, sort of benefits to that efficiency, but the trade-off perhaps is quality, right? And I think, here it's always helpful to like sort of recognize how we wear hats both as like producers but also as consumers, right? Like what is our reaction when we see things that are like sort of put out quickly, let's say on like Substack or on X, right? And I'm generalizing here, right? Like some people have like very thoughtful posts on these platforms, and alternatively like very rushed posts on like sort of like traditional platforms. But yeah, like what does it mean for us as consumers, and like when we're confronted not with just like so much information, but information that maybe is not as like hasn't gone through that same process, like what does that mean?
It's adding to this
Of course,
quickly. There was like a series of
pieces that came out on Substack and X about like this job market and like AI taking over jobs. One was something big is happening. The other one was like a Trinity research paper on like the global intelligence crisis 2028. And like these pieces like legitimately crashed the market, which is crazy. They got like hundreds of millions of views. And yeah, on platforms that did not need to be peer reviewed. In fact, a lot of the authors of these pieces were like, if I had known this would go viral, I probably would have done some more research and not worded it this way. But yeah, super interesting. I don't know. Yeah, we're not just looking towards like traditional news outlets for information anymore. And
with those pieces, it's not just that they crashed markets or had millions of views, but it's also how quickly we moved on from them. Like I don't even think about it, even though it's been a few weeks. And I, as someone who is quite chronically online, I know that a lot of smart people are not even thinking about it because they are probably healthier and not as online as the four of us and people like us. I think what I'm realizing, and this segues nicely to how Notion's starting to think about work, is that the internet is less and less for humans. It's way for agents. Like the internet is being made for agents with the amount of information being produced and the amount of information being consumed. And it's less about how am I going to read all of the articles on X Substack. You can just pick a platform. You don't even need to pick multiple platforms. Like just one platform, that is not meant for a human to consume at this point. And I think that is the big shift with agents actually going from just the most coders of coders using it to anyone can use Claude Code, really. Anyone can use OpenClaw. Anyone can use Notion agents as well. And I think it's becoming more of the skill, like how are you orchestrating these agents to get the information that you need so you can still make the impact to the humans, so the communities that you're serving, or the customers that you're serving, or the shareholders that you're serving. So I actually envision news in general having to pivot more back towards live events. Like I don't think you can have a successful news publication, whether you are the big three of like ABC, CBS, like that, or you're just an independent Substack. I do think live events, hopefully more accessible ones than the ones in New York, but generally, like I think people are craving that more and more. And I think people in community world have obviously been banging that drum for a while, but we're seeing more and more people turn out because humans can consume information best from other humans. We don't consume information best from agents. We've all run queries where AI gives us probably great information. We take like 10% because our brain cannot consume all of it. And then we move on to the next prompt. We move on to the next query. Like it's just not a human thing. And that's what I'm seeing increasingly with the internet, where there is no way I can keep up with the information. So I need to go to events, both the ones that I help host, but also the ones that I just attend, because that is a human pace where like I'm listening and then more importantly, like talking to people afterwards or before. And that's when I feel like the most okay with how I'm understanding things and progressing with tech, but other topics that are of interest.
I think that's a really interesting point. But another thing I think I was just thinking about with these traditional news platforms is, at the end of the day, their point is this idea of truth. They have a perspective, they probably have a bias, but at some degree, like what you were saying earlier, is the institution has these checks to get to truth. And I wonder what that means about maybe how society has been developing to maybe we're leaning away from really caring about truth. A lot of people saying we're in a post-truth world, whatever. So many different perspectives, facts, ways you can angle a story that, maybe people think that the openly personal, openly biased perspectives of people on Substack, to some people, maybe even hold more truth than if you're reading like a New York Times, Wall Street Journal. Like I feel like a lot of people would say that they trust someone on Substack, perhaps that they read a lot more than that. And I wonder what that says too, because beyond the actual just daily reporting, like journals and newspapers are the ones who do this like deep investigative journalism that will like do the leaking stories. So I wonder how that'll move forward. The idea of truth as either AI agents are roaming the web, or Substacks overtake journals and all that.
I think at least for the speed of tech, how we're thinking about it in Notion is that we want to operate as fast as possible. And sometimes that means operating with incomplete information. Like it's not that we ever try to make like never intend to make like poor decisions or uninformed decisions, but I think in that post-truth idea, sometimes it's like fuck that a bit and just move fast and not break things, but just like move fast even if you don't have the full picture. And maybe I should preface that all of this is of course my own opinion, not actually reflective of the company. But I think that's at least what I've noticed. And it's worked. Like I don't think we will be able to ship not only custom agents, which came out a few weeks ago, which are agents that are autonomous and can work on triggers when you sleep or you're not at your computer, but also launching final title TBD, but Notion workers, where Notion can connect to like literally anything with an API on the internet from any case, such as like pausing, skipping, starting your Spotify from Notion to pulling like Luma data because you host events there or posting to Substack through Notion. Like we're kind of, for a long time, it's been everything can connect into Notion, and now we're doing it the other way. And I think, especially to the developer community, that should feel exciting. There's a lot more to come. But the point is, I don't think you get a company like Notion moving like this from the far, far away years of being a note-taking app, a productivity app. I know a lot of people still think of us that way to just the speed we're doing now, unless you are operating on sometimes like incomplete information because it just is moving too fast. So it's almost like not always a requirement anymore. And again, I want to speak very carefully because again, we make the smartest decisions we can, but the mentality I think has changed to this. Once you feel like you have enough information, just try it, break it even if needed, and then we'll iterate from there. So it feels more scrappy than I think even when I joined not even a few months ago.
Yeah, I think to integrate those points a little bit, kind of like what you were saying about the way Notion and tech broadly is working, and what Austin was saying about truth. I do wonder if it is like something that's fragmenting across industries almost, right? Like obviously with tech, right? Like that's the place where they're moving fast and breaking things. But on the flip side, right? Like I've talked with this group before about like some of my work, which involves like very manual labor,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But there is like truly like no substitute for it. We can like let's say we use AI, which we're actually not even allowed to, right? But let's say we use AI. You have to get human eyes on it because if there's a mistake and it goes to like the judge, goes to the court, like that is a big, big problem. You know what I mean? So like at the end of the day, it needs to have that oversight. And like in some ways that kind of like reflects this idea of like in this particular industry, which I'm working on, which is like basically in the legal field, tangential to law, right? Like truth remains very, very important. Like what is objectively like what is said on the source is what is accurately reflected sort of in, you know, whatever we're producing. It's just an interesting way to think about that. It's maybe not like when we say like as a society, maybe that's not even so like homogenous of a thing anymore, but it's like depends on your perspective. And this maybe goes into a broader conversation too about like people in tech or people who are working with tech very frequently, just like having a very fundamentally different view about society. And perhaps like truth is a big part of it, right? But
I mean, just go to SF for a fundamentally different view of society. I mean, Megan saw it. I'm going to SF next week, and I want to see it again. But I feel like every time I go, which is every few months, it feels like a different world. I'm not just the Waymos that are going around. It's like literally when you talk to people and the way they talk to you, like you're not on Cloud Code or like you're not like these things aren't regular conversations happening anywhere else in the States, maybe similar ones in China or India, like other more like tech forward countries. But I think that it's also these different realities even between our industries, but still like both of our industries have a lot of impact, obviously. So I just think that we don't need a consensus or even a framework at this point. I think we just need to be able to talk to each other. Like where are like the tech legal events that are happening? Like where are the tech or like bigger tech startup events happening or like media and tech? I just think there isn't enough crossover because I just don't think that's clearly in the interest of whoever is hosting these events. Like there's maybe company interest or organizational interest. And I think organizations like the AI Collective are in that more of a minority where they are pretty industry agnostic. For sure, it's AI, but that means so many different things. And we have spanned all of those things I just talked about. So again, I just think without, again, those human to human conversations, it's going to be really hard for people to meaningfully advance AI in a way that the majority of us can agree on because there will always be differentiators in safety or how much humans actually need to be in the loop. And I think especially it's going to make people who do want humans in the loop for good reasons more and more pissed off when the tech people are writing these articles saying you don't need that. You don't need humans in the loop, AGI by 2030, or general I think in some ways we have achieved AGI, honestly. But like, general AGI, super intelligence, 2030, you won't need. Like, that's not going to convince anybody. I think it's, again, this lack of understanding, especially between bigger industries. Yeah.
Yeah, I love the idea of like splintering sectors because I think that really is it in terms of like even for myself, I see it in terms of like I read a Wall Street Journal article the other day talking about SF founders using agents, and it's like them racing each other to see how much you can do, how long you can go using agents without it breaking.
Yeah.
And I'm over here like, do you know how expensive Claude Cowork is? It's like 200 or something a month, and I'm not going to spend it on that when I don't really know what I would do with it. And this reminds me a lot of, I think it was a piece by Jasmine Sun on Substack that was talking about tech policy looking in DC. And something she noted was there seems to be just a chasm between the people building AI and the people trying to regulate it. In terms of the people who are building AI, like Sam Altman, can't see a world without it.
Yeah.
They already think it's to the point where they would like, I think Sam Altman said something about he would like raise his child using AI. He can't imagine doing it without AI. Then you have these people regulating it in DC, never use it in their life. Don't really know what's going on. And just the chasm between these two worlds. And then also knowing that the rest of America is just somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's just I think the thing we're seeing with AI is that as much novelty there is with this technology and as much foreignness there is, it's still ultimately a human thing to decide if it will be good or bad for us. More and more I hear the way people talk about AI, unless you are like the Sam Altmans, is in this very like, it's how it kind of translates well to how any public figure talks to people. Like no one wants to be talked down to, and people want to like relate to what you're saying, and people want to understand how that affects them. Like if you talk about insert topic, but AI in this grand scheme of things, how is that going to affect like my paycheck to pay? You know what I mean? I just think it's not how people are generally thinking, and that's something that America as a whole hasn't really figured out in, I'd say, the past 10 years. I think AI here is different, but in this way it does fit that pattern. How we're talking about AI with the DOW and Anthropic and OpenAI, it's inherently a political problem. So that's why you have like a civil rights group like Fire weighing in on this one rather than whatever the latest like Notion custom agent is now. But both topics are AI, but it's just how it's being used. I think sometimes reading between the lines and asking at least myself, like, is this really about AI? Especially now that I have a better sense of what AI really means in terms of the technical aspects, or is this like just a human thing, and that requires a completely different solution?
Yeah, I would actually turn it to Megan here because, like, obviously, like I think we were all talking about AI in like a very like societal sense, right? And in like big picture terms, like industry, what have you. But you're building for consumer, right? Which is kind of like looking at like the individual actor, right? So I guess what are you thinking about this conversation? What are we not capturing?
I mean, I guess maybe what's become more apparent through like making content and then seeing like the comment section go kind of like crazy sometimes on topics of like most recently I made a video about the co-founders of X leaving because the AI safety guy from Anthropic leaving because they were like AGI is coming, AI safety is not where it should be. And people are like very afraid. People are very afraid, but they're also being told that if they're not getting on AI now, they're getting left behind.
Yeah.
Getting left behind. What does that mean? Like, where is that left behind? Like, I think, yeah, the signaling is just very confusing on the consumer side. People know that they should be using it. They don't really know what it means to be getting left behind. There are, I think the majority of people in this country have never used AI. And so I think like very much it's true. Like there's just this huge gap and like consumers fall somewhere in the middle of that. But I think like, yeah, it's public opinion and like and public literacy that's going to just be like the major problem in this conversation. And like, policymakers can yap about it, and tech leaders can yap about it, but in the end, it's like, what are we gonna do?
It's also like, what are your friends saying?
Yeah,
and whether that's like
That
a lot of people
that's
view
really
you as like a parasocial friend, like whether it's like that, or even like I care about how the three of you view it, right? Or what's my family saying?
Yeah.
What's like my trusted mentor saying? Like it's also about what is my community saying too. That's
Yeah.
probably more important than whatever leaders are saying in some cases.
That's true.
Quick question: when you put posts like that of saying like looking at the X co-founders leaving, or XAI co-founders leaving, how do you force yourself to think about it or be careful about saying certain things when talking about AI at large like this, whether super intelligence or the risks of AI? Like,
Mhm.
do you really think about like how you want to portray that or how you don't want to portray it?
Mm.
She doesn't. She doesn't think about it. She just does.
No, yeah. Honestly, I put a video recently. It was that video, and I didn't think too much about it. I was just like, this is happening. Also, I did this AI safety fellowship, and we talked about this a year ago, and I didn't really believe it. And it like a lot more people than I would have saw it. And I was like, oh wow. People were like very upset in the comments because they were like, oh, you are talking about like AI safety, yet you work with OpenAI a lot. And like, I know people were doing deep dives with my life in the comments, and I was like, oh,
Yeah, again, that's just like that's a human thing.
Yeah,
Like
it
that would
is.
just be if you were in a separate industry. It's like, oh, like you
Yeah.
say you care about patients, but you work with big pharma.
Right,
It's the same thing.
exactly. And it makes sense. And like I think it's important to be like be a skeptic of AI, but also I'm an AI optimist, and I think you can
same.
do a lot with it. I think you can strike a balance with both. I'm struggling to find that balance in my content because you can only say so much in a 2-minute video. But yeah, I think I just try to make a balance of covering all ranges of topics.
Let's close out with a lightning round, as has become custom. So I will quickly explain what this first question is about. So in tennis, there's an unforced error. So that is an error that you shouldn't have made, but you did. And in tennis, there's also a winner. So it's when you
Yeah.
hit a ball that the other person cannot return. So everyone, what has been an unforced error and a winner from the past week? It can be building related or not. It can also be personal. So
Ooh.
Megan,
Oh.
the mic is in your hands. So I saw that you're trying to pass it off, but Megan, maybe we start with you. Winner or
Okay.
unforced error, whichever one you want to start with. and then
Okay.
the other.
Maybe I can just maybe this is cheap, but I think my unforced error was probably with content and not realizing like my platform. I think I need to be a lot more conscious about like what I put out and consider all sides when I make videos. And include that very clearly in the content.
Right.
Winners.
So many. You can't even think about how many there are.
No, maybe this is more like project startup related, but I feel like my co-founder and I finally got into a groove where we're like actually excited again about what we're building, because we were in a period of maybe 2 weeks where we were kind of like we'd lost that spark. So
Yeah.
that's exciting.
Great. The co-founder relationship continues to be deciphered exclusively on Mindful Notions. Nowhere else is the co-founder relationship dissected as much as on here.
True.
Amazing. Austin, unforced error winner, and then the other.
I don't know about unforced error. I don't miss.
Hillary has something for you. Hillary can say that for you, that if you need some.
I think the only thing I can think of, and this is kind of what we struggle with a lot, and going back to what we were saying about in terms of like building a relationship, is I didn't work as much as I would have wanted to this week / past 2 weeks. I try to put out compete like every 2 weeks. It's going to be 3 weeks this time. And something we tell each other in terms of like, you have to give yourself time to see friends, have fun, but it is always a thing nagging at the back of the mind.
Yeah.
So I don't want to call it an unforced error, but close enough. In terms of the winner, I would say I put out compete 3.5. And it was 3.5 because it wasn't the traditional like 2 week cycle. It didn't go out on European Guanxi Substack where else it went out because it was like an afterthought I had. And I really like it. I think this was one of the first times it clicked. Like how I'm personally trying to think about sovereign AI and my like it felt like a unique contribution. So that was a cool, despite it being 3.5, not an actual episode. Like something clicks there.
Okay, I'm gonna keep mine more real.
Right.
Unforced error. I had a scheduled call with a friend who was instrumental in my law school applications.
It was Tuesday.
It was on Tuesday. No, it was on Monday. It was
Oh,
scheduled for Monday.
Okay.
And I completely I had forgotten to put it in my calendar, and then she was texting me, and then I didn't realize I didn't have my phone exactly on the other side. I felt so bad. Huge unforced error. Winner. I've also been having a lot of trouble waking up recently. But the winner is the past few days I've been getting up before 8 a.m.
Wow.
Which used to
4?
8,
Oh.
Austin. So I'm calling that a winner because I feel like I have time again in the morning. I'm not just rushing. So.
Oh yeah.
We'll discuss later.
Yay.
Yeah, I have another question for that. Yes. We'll set you up for it. Yes. I would say my unforced error is I went on this date on Saturday, or more accurately, I had the guy over here and I didn't need to. Like I was pretty tired, and I think the way I approach dating right now is I want to feel like I can bring not necessarily like the best version of myself, but just one that can be lively and be present, especially because I think sometimes with strangers that you're trying to make a good impression on, it actually is more important sometimes. And I felt like I just didn't give him like the best energy, and I just kind of felt bad about that. I was like, I didn't have to do Saturday night while we were both like just texting. We could have just done another night, but we did it, and I think we could be friends. I don't know if we're gonna have a second date. Yeah, I don't think he does this exist, but if he does, it's nothing about you. You're great as a guy. It's all me. So it's all something's wrong here. So my winner is, I think every week I get a clear sense like where Notion is going, and that's partly just being in the culture. But I also think it's me reaching out to people, me reading a lot of the docs that you don't have to read, but just like the research the incredible research some of our teams doing, and I think I'm really excited, and also I think so many people are gonna be surprised at how fast Notion changes this year, and that's what I was talking about earlier. But it's a really exciting time to be, and also a really rare time to be at a company that is well over 10 years old at this point and still finding ways to be so scrappy and innovative, and also working in like a human facing role where I get to help the people who will ultimately help like the thousands of people around the world really understand this, and feeling really lucky to be on that team. And we celebrated my birthday on Monday. They got me this like huge bowl of Kit Kats. We got gelato, and I don't know. There's so many things I think with the Notion community team where, in the best way possible, like you didn't have to do that. Like you didn't have to look out for me in this way, or intuitively guess this, or have like an actually productive career chats. I think we've all had career chats that you're kind of like, what was the point of that? Haven't had that at Notion, and yeah, that's my winner. I think it's just like I think I understand the company and where it's going better and better, and that is a continuous, I think, winner. But because this is the first time we're asking this question, I will say that. I want to put it back to Hillary because I think we have to decide like an ultimate winner out of our lives, and I think we do have one. So Hillary, what did you just do?
Right.
I haven't been. It hasn't been recognized, but I did put in my 2 weeks notice today.
Finally,
So officially, I will be leaving my first full-time job.
first paycheck.
Seriously, in 2 weeks.
I'll believe it when I see it. Believe it when I see it.
Austin is the biggest hater. Anyways,
And Hillary's been working here since intern days.
Yes, so it's been a
this is
while.
huge.
We should definitely celebrate, and maybe like either through episode or we're gonna like record an episode to celebrate, but we will do some sort of celebration just like we did when Hillary got into law school and when Fig went live. And I don't know, I think we've had so many things to celebrate among the four of us, and I think it's been really nice to do so. But big congrats, Hillary. I'm sure we have all known this was coming. Austin, more than anybody, has had to listen to the ups and downs, and that's probably why he is the most skeptical. But I think even though that was a one question lightning round, that probably was a really good way to close it out. This has been Mindful Notions, Accessible Intelligence Launch. We really should figure out what we want to do with those titles. And if you're listening on Substack or watching, this is using Substack Recording Studio. So last time I asked/begged the Substack team if they were listening to our live stream to make landscape a thing, and now it is, and that's why you can see all of us, and it's on the better quality of the iPhone camera. If you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, consider liking and giving us a 5-star rating. It really helps draw new listeners. And until next time, when we will have even more updates, because we are all quite literally building like crazy, we hope you all take care. If you care about AI, read about it, but not too much, because there is so much to life outside of whatever work that we are doing. It's a good reminder for all of us as well. And we will catch you then. Thanks, guys. Bye.